It's the Sick Podcast. Marinaro with you. And the Montreal Canadiens are playing the Toronto Maple Leafs. At the time of this recording, the Canadiens are up by 1-0 versus Toronto after a 2-1 win on a game-winning goal by Paul Byron in game number 1 on Thursday night. And joining me right now, someone who knows a thing or two about the Canadiens playing the Leafs in the playoffs, even though prior to this year, it hadn't happened since 1979. He was a part of that series, playing for the Montreal Canadiens. Cam Connor, how you doing?
Really good, buddy. Two things I got to say. Number one, that goal, the winning goal last night, wasn't just a goal. It was a shorthanded goal.
You're right.
Right? That's unbelievable. Whoever was in the penalty box for the Canadiens, when he saw that shorthanded goal, he jumped up because that took a lot of pressure off him.
Thomas Tatar.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So, because when you're in the box, the game's on the line. You're playing a team like Toronto Maple Leafs, and look at the firepower they have. They got some boys that could score those goals. You're shorthanded, only a couple minutes left in the game. You're sweating that they're going to score. You don't want them to score, and you get a shorthanded goal, which was a game winner. Excellent.
Cam, we're going to get back to the Canadiens and the Leafs this year, 2021 edition, but I'd love to talk to you about your career. You were drafted by the Montreal Canadiens, first round, 5th overall in the 1974 NHL amateur draft. But that Canadiens team of the 70s was stocked. They were absolutely loaded. It wasn't an easy lineup to get into, was it?
Well, it wasn't. But that really, I didn't take that into consideration. Should I go to the World Hockey Association? Should I go to Montreal? I never followed hockey. In fact, all my buddies and relatives who probably followed hockey a lot closer than I did, they said it's such an honor to be drafted number 1 by Montreal. How could you not go there?
Yeah. And
the way I thought about it was, I realized that if I went to Montreal, I'd be a household name. I knew that, okay? But at 19 years old, I said to myself, you know what? World Hockey has offered me a hell of a lot more money than Montreal did. And I think I'll take the money even if nobody knows who I am. So that's the only reason that I decided to go to the World Hockey instead of Montreal Canadiens, which in hindsight was the biggest mistake I ever made.
So, you were talking about, of course, the Phoenix Roadrunners for a couple of seasons and the Houston Aeros before you ended up joining the Canadiens in 78, 79. If you don't mind me asking, how much money are we talking back then?
Well, the Montreal Canadiens offered me a 3-year one-way contract. And they offered me $150,000 to sign my contract, which, if you prorate it to today's dollar, that's, it's probably near $1 million. And so they offered me $150,000 to sign. Phoenix Roadrunners offered me $200,000 to sign.
Wow.
Montreal Canadiens offered me a 3-year deal. And if I remember correctly, it started at 60, then 70 or 80. Or it was 70, 80, 90, something like that. I think it was 70, 80, 90, okay? And Phoenix offered me a 5-year deal starting at 90, then 100, 100 and a quarter, 145, 150, something like that. Plus, they paid my lawyer's fees for 5 years. So it was, it was substantially different, like a big difference. And so when my agent told me, here's Montreal's offer and here's Phoenix, I just said, well, is that their final offer? And he said, yep, that's it. So I know that Scotty Bowman, when he found out that I was going to the World Hockey, he tried to convince me that they'll give me more money. And but I gave Phoenix, I didn't sign anything. And Scotty asked me if I signed anything. I said I didn't. So he said, well, we'll stay on the phone. I'll go get you another $200,000. And at age 19, I'm still proud of myself because I had people in the business world, honestly. When I was in the computer consulting business, lying to me for an extra $1 an hour, lying to me for $1 an hour.
Wow.
And at 19, I told Scotty, I said, Scotty, I can't sign with you. And he said, well, you said you didn't sign. I said, yes, but I gave Phoenix my word. And as it turned out, I got screwed out of a lot of money, but I'm still proud that I kept my word.
Good for you. It's the Sick Podcast. I'm Marinero, and the show is brought to you by Essentia, the world's only natural memory foam mattress. Go to myessentia.com/sickpod and see why Essentia is the mattress of choice for many athletes, including over 25% of professional hockey players. Use code SICKPOD for a free pillow with your purchase. Essentia, beyond organic sleep. At one point, you finally make your way to the Montreal Canadiens. Cam, we talked about that 78-79 season with the Montreal Canadiens, where you got in 23 games in the regular season on a team that included the likes of Lafleur, Schutt, Robinson, Lemaire, Lapointe, Savard. I mean, the list goes on and on. So many greats.
Genie, right?
You're right about
you can't forget him.
What? How difficult was it for you to make your way onto that team, or was it easy knowing that you were going to be a member of the supporting cast?
You know, again, when I went to Montreal, they signed me to a 5-year contract, one-way money. And it never occurred to me that I would be sent to the farm team. It just didn't enter my mind. Yes, I knew they were a powerful team, and they had won the Stanley Cup 3 years in a row. And so going there, they only lost a guy named Murray Wilson from the year before. They said they only lost one player, but they added Mark Napier, Rod Langway, Pat Hughes, and myself, and there's only one open position for a team that won the Stanley Cup in 3 years in a row. So I knew that the players he added, plus the players that they had, were really good hockey players. So I didn't want to. I mean, you want to get in the lineup right away. You want to earn your stripes, but it wasn't to be. Scotty had other plans for myself, and I got to be honest with myself. I was a little intimidated by Scotty and how negative he was, especially to me. And so I just never played the kind of hockey I was capable of. And what I'd shown from junior on is, I'd go after the puck any part of the ice, my side, the other side, corners, take the body. When you take the body, you get into fights. And that's how I play my best hockey. But I didn't do that when I got to Montreal. When I got in the lineup, Bowman said, your defenseman better not score any goals and your winger better not. So I just played my wing. I didn't go off my wing. And I wasn't noticed out there at all. I did nothing to promote myself to play the way I did. I was too busy thinking that I couldn't make mistakes instead of going out there and playing the game of hockey.
So as good a career Scotty Bowman had as a head coach in the National Hockey League that went on for decades and decades and decades and Stanley Cups, he wasn't necessarily the best coach for you in that moment. Is that accurate?
I would say that's accurate. Again, you know what? There's some people, like we'll say, do you remember Pierre LaRouche?
Of course, 50 goal scorer.
That's it. So he came to Montreal. He'd been in the NHL for a while. He could score goals, Pierre. And with Pierre, if he wasn't working hard in practice, at least, the coaches perceived he wasn't working hard, they'd start yelling at him and give him scowly looks. And Pierre, it didn't hurt his confidence one little bit. He'd pick it up, and it didn't bother him one little bit. And I'm just the opposite. You know what? I'll try my best every time. And if you're getting on my case and you think that I'm going to play better through negative reinforcement, that's just not me. I tried my best, but the coaches that would pat me on the back and I would grow. And I think most people respond to positive reinforcement over negative reinforcement. And Scotty, not even one time, he'd walk by hallways when we were on the road in our hotel, and I'd say hello to him. He'd just look at the ceiling and walk right by me. And I'm thinking, I don't think this guy likes me at all. And so I'm not, you can't, when you coach a team, you can't treat every 20, 22 players exactly the same way. You have to figure out which guys you have to pull, which guys you have to push. And you got to know what works for individuals. And so for me, I'm the type of guy that, like Herb Brooks, when I played with Herb Brooks, he went to school to learn how to motivate, how to talk to people, his tone of his voice, when to pause when he talks. So when he get up and he start talking to us, I just couldn't wait to get on that ice. He had me so pumped up. And, there's a lot of coaches that I've read where they say, these guys make a lot of money. They shouldn't have to be motivated and pumped up. They should come to the rink pumped up every day. Well, I say when you play 82, 84 games plus exhibition games, I think the year we won the cup, we played 116 games. That's like every 3 or 4 times a week.
Wow.
And you need some help. You just need a coach that can motivate you and to bring the best out of you by getting your mind even more focused. And so these coaches that say, well, it's not up to me to motivate them. They're highly paid, well, whatever. But I think those people that are saying that, they can't motivate. That's not who they are. They can do X's and O's, but they don't know how to talk to people other than, and Scotty, you're right. I mean, he did, on paper, he won a lot of Stanley Cups. And you might have guys that played for him for 6, 7, 8 years that maybe don't agree with what I said. But based on what I know, how I'm motivated and how I was treated as an individual, this is my viewpoint from Cam Connor.
He is Cam Connor, today age 66, and he co-hosts a podcast called View from the Penalty Box podcast with your son, Christopher. That's pretty cool, huh? I guess you get to recount some of these stories.
Well, thank you for mentioning that. The reason I do my podcast and I tell my stories, it's kind of interesting. I seem to remember so many stories. My buddy, I don't know if you've heard of Roddy Piper.
Of course.
Okay, that's my best friend.
I know you grew up with him.
That's my best friend.
Wow.
And he'd say, because I helped him, recall some memories in our childhood that went into his book. I was just on his last 2-hour A&E special and just telling some stories. It just seems like I can remember a lot of these stories growing up. And so, with my son, he said, Dad, let's do a podcast. And I said, well, I don't care if I tell my stories, but he kind of convinced me that I should. And from my side, I'm not making any money. It costs me money, actually, to do these podcasts. But I do it for selfish reasons because, you know what? It's brought me closer to my son. And there's a lot of things that we've discussed that he didn't know about me. And I think that's the reason I do my podcasts.
Good for you. That's so beautiful to hear. Speaking of Roddy Piper, arguably the greatest heel in the history of professional wrestling. I know you said he was your best friend. You grew up together, right? Where did you guys grow up together?
We grew up in Winnipeg. And we met each other in grade 10.
Yeah.
Our lockers were right next to each other, but we didn't talk to each other. We just got our books out and went our own ways. And then I've told this story before, but it's true. Then, later on, in grade 10, there was a knock at my back door and there was a couple guys that were my friends and they brought Rod over. And Rod's real name is Rod Toombs. And they brought him over and they're just standing at my back door. And the one guy says, Cam, you're a pretty tough guy. And this new guy, Rod, he's pretty tough. Why don't you have a fight? I said, okay. So Rod and I went into my garage, just the two of us, and closed the door. And we scrapped. And I could tell that Rod knew what he was doing because, he boxed when he was growing up in Toronto. And every time he threw a punch, he'd make a noise. And that even the noise scared me a bit. And anyways, I've got I had to knock him out. I knew that I wasn't going to beat him, so I threw my left. My hands were pretty fast. He got out of the way, and I tore my tricep. All the muscles snapped like a rubber band, and I ended up having to get it operated on. And then he drilled me, and I had a 650 Triumph motorcycle in my garage. Just like the movies, he hit me, and I went back, and I flipped over my motorcycle. And from that day forward, the pecking order was in order.
Oh, really? What a story that is. Wow. He is Cam Connor, former NHLer who grew up with the great Roddy Piper. And they had a scrap back in grade 10. Isn't that something? This is the Sick Podcast. Go to sportbuffshop.com for all of your officially licensed sports apparel and more. Use code SICK15 for 15% off on all of their items. All right. Back to hockey if we can. But, man, that's a great story. I'd love to hear more Roddy Piper stories one day. Too bad he's no longer with us, right? He went way too young, didn't he?
Oh, for sure. But, I mean, he took me out when I lived in New York playing with the Rangers. He'd come into town, and I lived right on the New York-Connecticut border, which is where they're called WWF back in the day.
Yeah.
Their headquarters was probably 3-minute car ride from my house. So Rod would come and he'd say, well, let's go for some beer. We'd be out with Andre the Giant.
Wow.
We'd be out with the Hart Brothers, Cowboy Bob Orton, and a whole bunch of other guys. And, I have a lot of stories to tell. I didn't say a word. You go with those wrestlers, what a life they lead. Like, I'd never be a wrestler. Never. No matter, Rod made millions. I'd never do it, no matter what. Like, what a life these guys lead. It was amazing going out with them. But
so that night you went out with them.
Yeah.
Can you remember how much Andre the Giant drank and how much he ate?
Well, I could tell you. Well, Rod told me how much he ate. And, I mean, I think it was like every time he sat down, it was at least a dozen eggs, right, for breakfast. At least a dozen eggs.
Wow.
But I remember I sat at the bar beside Andre one night. And, I don't have to tell you how big that man was. Like, his head was 2 to 3 times as big as anybody's head. And I remember he had a tall glass that he was drinking from. Like, it was like a tall one.
Yeah.
And he put his hands around it. You couldn't even see the glass. Like, his hands, each finger was the size of a big dill pickle.
Wow.
Like, he was massive. And it was just interesting just to be in his life for, that little bit I did, because I've never seen a man his size. And it was just interesting listening to him.
Aaron Arrow for excellent photo, locally family-owned store on Park Avenue in Montreal. And it's centrally located, of course, close to downtown shopping. University's professional staff at the store and online to help you choose that gear that you really need. So I'll tell you what else was massive was you got your shot in the playoffs for the Canadiens versus the Toronto Maple Leafs. And at one point, you scored a huge goal in that series, almost like the way Paul Byron scored one in game 1. Can you paint a picture of that game, that moment, that goal? Talk to me about it.
I certainly will. It's not really a complicated story. It was in the 5th period, so it was 2 overtimes. And I didn't play the first 2 games of the playoffs in Montreal against Toronto. I didn't expect to dress because Scotty just doesn't dress me very much. I just wasn't even anticipating. But I found out years later that Kenny Dryden went and talked to Scotty Bowman after the second game.
Oh, really?
Excuse me. Yeah, in Montreal. And he said, Toronto Maple Leafs, they're a grinding, bumping, get in your face kind of team. And that's the kind of game Cam plays. And, Tiger Williams and a few of those guys, I played junior against them. And, Tiger's a big bluffer. You ever watch any of his highlights? He'll make sure he gets the first punch in. And if it's a fair fight, he just grabs you. He puts his arms behind and he just wraps around your neck. And it's not even a fight, but that's how he was. And so he knew, that I could clean his clock. He knew that, and I knew that.
Hold on a second here. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Are you calling Tiger Woods a phony? Tiger Williams a phony?
I'm pleading the 5th.
Good one. Good one. All right. So Ken Dryden talks to Scotty Bowman about you. Wow. Isn't that amazing? What an amazing teammate. Was he the only one that did that? Or did others go to bat for you?
Well, you know what? Again, I didn't know anything was going on. You hear years later, nobody comes up and said, okay, I talked to Scotty. It kind of squeaks out. So, they dressed me for the game in Toronto because usually it's rougher in the other team's rink than on the road.
Yeah.
Usually, unless you play Boston Bruins, right? From back in the day, or Philadelphia Flyers. And so, okay, they told me I'm in the lineup. I'm excited. I'm thinking I'm going to get my shot. I didn't play one shift the first, second, third, first overtime. The second overtime.
Hold on a second here if we can. With Cam Connor, who was part of that 1979 Montreal Canadiens Stanley Cup team. You dressed for game 3 versus Toronto, and you didn't play not 1 second through the first 3 periods, nor 1 second in the first overtime period. I don't think that's ever happened again in the history of hockey.
So that's, it really, when you're on the bench for that long, like I tried to keep my legs loose in case I got a chance. So maybe if there was a commercial, I'd jump on the ice and skate for a second or two and jump back off. And then when the period was over, I'd jump over and I skate around the ice a couple times, and just to try to keep the legs loose. And I did this every chance I got. And so now we're in the, this double overtime. And what had happened was the Leafs, they went with 4 lines all game. Montreal Canadiens went with 3 lines all game.
Wow.
And so, you know what? Those guys are in terrific shape. Those 3 lines got the most ice time, so they're in game shape. But when you start going into the first overtime, and that rink was hot, and I was told, and I don't know if it's accurate, that the Toronto Maple Leafs turn the ice plant down because, if they make it a little softer, it doesn't really affect the Toronto Maple Leaf team because they're just a bunch of grinders anyways. But the high-flying, skating Montreal Canadiens, it slowed them down, and it's hard work. And so our team you could tell that they were starting to get tired in the first overtime. Now we're into the second overtime, and the guys are getting tired. Like they're playing against a fresher team. And I saw Bowman looking up and down the bench, and I'm thinking, I didn't know if I wanted to go out because your legs are like concrete.
Yeah.
And so he said, Connor, get on the ice. Don't overhandle the puck and whatever else. And so I'm laughing to myself. And so when you play with the Montreal Canadiens, you're taught that, when your team has the puck, what to do. And as soon we reverse that, when the other team has the puck, you know what to do. But as soon as there's a turnover in Montreal, we have the puck, you just turn on a dime immediately and you start heading back the other way towards their end. So there was Serge Savard, I think he intercepted a puck, in the center ice, more closer to our blue line. And as soon as he did that, I quickly turned, Riseborough quickly turned, and Savard, I believe it was, forwarded to Riseborough. I'm a little bit ahead of Riseborough, hitting that blue line. And there's no defenseman in front of me from Toronto. He got caught up there. There was a defenseman who's a pretty tough boy named Dave Hutchison on the other wing, more in front of Riseborough. And in Montreal, you're taught to keep your stick on the ice when you want to pass. So I had my stick on the ice, and Riseborough put it right on the tape, and I'm on my backhand. And because I had watched for 5 periods, Paul Matier, the goalie, and if you remember him, he is a petite goalie. He's not a big guy at all.
No.
He's not a big goalie. So when you're not big, you got to rely on angles and quickness. So watching him, I said to myself, like every time somebody would hit the top of the circle and they were going to say, take a slap shot. They put their head down, look at the puck, and they take a shot. And right then, Paul Matier would come charge. As soon as you put your head down, he'd come charging out of the net to cut the angle, and most of the time you'd put it right into his pads.
Yeah.
So he did this consistently for 5 periods. And I told myself, if I get my chance, I know, he's going to come out if I put my head down to shoot. So if I get my chance, I'll just fake the shot and go around him because he'll be way out of his net. And in theory, I should have an open net. So I got it on my backhand. I'm coming in, and I can see Hutchison, and I'm saying to myself, I got to cut a little bit more towards his side if I want to go from my backhand to my forehand. And I probably was concentrating a little bit on the cross check to my head I was going to get because I didn't wear a helmet. And so I thought he was going to take me out. As it turned out, I went from my backhand. Sure enough, Palmateer comes out, and then I started to go to my forehand. And Palmateer realized that I was moving, so he opened his legs. He took his stick off the ice. And I've never lied about this. I tried to go from my backhand to my forehand, but in between, I lost the puck, and it went in through his legs. And, the guys, and I didn't see that replay probably for 25, 30 years. I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so when it was over, I do remember that the guys were so happy for me. Like, I went through a lot that year, and I never complained once. I had chances when the newspapers say to me, you should be playing in Montreal. Why aren't you? Or how come you're not? I didn't say a word. I just said, I'll get my chance. I never caused any trouble, and I never cried on anybody's shoulders. I just accepted it. And I think the guys appreciated that I wasn't whining about it. I just did my best every practice.
Wow. Good for you.
Anyway, so they were happy for me. That's where I'm going with this.
What a huge goal. You score the game winner in overtime in game 3. Larry Robinson scores the game winner in game 4. You eliminate the Toronto Maple Leafs. You guys go on to win the Stanley Cup that year. But there's a story about your name on the cup.
Yeah, and that's another one. I didn't know anything about this for 20 years. I had no idea that, the National Hockey League whoever, I don't know, like the Bettman, the equivalent of, they were saying, no, the rule is that if you don't play a certain minimum amount of games during the season,
yeah,
and you don't play the last series, which was against the New York Rangers, then you're not entitled to have your name on the cup. I didn't know this. And so I found out years later that It wasn't only me, it was Yvon Cornway as well. So, because Yvon at the start of the season, he had back surgery, and he was out all year round. But he'd be in the dressing room, and I'll never forget how hard he was working to try to, get better from his back surgery. Oh, it was something else. So he was on the road all the time. I went on all the road trips, every practice, all the team functions. I never got sent to the farm team, so I just thought I'd automatically be on there. And so, like I said, many, many years later, I had heard, and I can't remember how I found out, that, and I believe the individuals were Ken Dryden, Doug Riseborough, and Bob Gainey were our player reps. And so when they found out that my name nor Yvon Cornway's name was going to be on the Stanley Cup, they told the NHL, they said, you know what? If you don't put their two names on the Stanley Cup, they're part of our team. If you don't put their name on the Stanley Cup, you do not have permission to put anybody's name on the Stanley Cup from our team. And so, the NHL, they thought about it. Then they came back, said, well, we'll make an exception. We'll put their names on it. And again, I had no idea. I didn't know that the guys did that for me and Yvon. And I am forever grateful, forever.
Wow, amazing. We talked about with Cam Connor, who played for the Montreal Canadiens and the Edmonton Oilers and the New York Rangers for that matter there. So not only the Canadiens, but we talked about all the great players on that team. But my idol growing up was Guy Lafleur. Give me a Lafleur story, Cam.
Well, I've been fortunate, and I'm not trying to name drop. I played with Phil Esposito and all those great Montreal Canadiens. Just about everybody on the team is, in my mind, a Hall of Famer. I played with Gretzky. I played with Messier. I played with Gordie Howe. I played with some good hockey players. And they're all, those guys are all humble. Guy is my favorite out of all of them.
Oh, really?
That's the truth. And really and Gordie Howe's right up there too. What those guys have accomplished And I remember Lafleur, whenever, like anybody on the Montreal Canadiens, again, we'll go back to the Boston Bruins.
Yeah.
They had a tough team. And we were playing them in the playoffs. And I played on teams when it got rough out there. And I would see these guys come back to the bench and they would say to the coach, get Cam out there, get Cam after those guys. And I'm laughing, thinking, you know what? You make more money than me by a lot. Like, why don't you do something? Stick up for yourself. But I mean, I never said anything. Lafleur, he is so humble. And we're, after playing the Bruins, we're in the shower in Montreal Forum. And I look at Lafleur. He had so many red welts on his body. Wow. And lumps. And I said, what the hell happened to you, Guy? He just matter-of-factly, he says, oh, the Boston Bruins, they spear me and slash me. You would never know it. He didn't complain a bit. And when, you know, there's some guys that when they get that kind of attention, physical attention, they slow down a bit. They're not quite as fast as going after that loose puck. They might get hit. Guy never complained once. You just never know what was happening to him. He didn't tell anybody. He just accepted it. He put the pressure on himself every game to play like Guy Lafleur could play. Every game he'd come out and he'd do his best. And I love the man. I used to hang with him a bit because we lived in Beaconsfield area together, and we would travel. And the only other thing I'll say about Guy is that because we lived so close together in the spring, I barbecued a chicken. And he came over to my house and I wasn't guarding my chicken. And I went out later to look at it and it was missing. And I couldn't figure out who that took my chicken, right? Because it was in a spit. And so a week or two later, Guy says, oh, you cook a pretty good chicken. I said, oh. So that's where my chicken went. So
when was the last time you saw or talked to Flower?
That would have been probably in the December of 2003, November, December, when they had the Heritage game, first NHL outdoor game, played in Edmonton. And I was very, very fortunate that Ray Jaoul was the manager. Yeah. And I asked Reggie, I said, you know, I'd like to play that game. I'm in business for myself here in Edmonton, and it would help me. And I remember him saying, well, how come you don't play in any of our Canadian games? I said, well, you know, I live quite far away to be playing in your games in Montreal. He goes, well, that's true. So I remember he said, okay, you're playing. And then I remember Jacques Demers was the coach. And I was listening to the night before, and he was saying, I don't agree with everybody that, you know, is put on that hockey team. And so, you know, I knew what he was talking about because there was Brian Scrutland, I believe he was his captain, who was living in Calgary, and he wanted to play. And so Demers was trying to get Scrutland in over me, but Réjean said, no way, we're keeping Cam in the lineup. So that's the last time that I got to see and play with Guy. And
you talked about Wayne Gretzky. You moved on from the Montreal Canadiens to the Edmonton Oilers with a young Wayne Gretzky, who I think put up 100 and almost 140 points.
136, tied with Marcel Dion.
Wow.
As his first year in the National League. So
you see this kid, his first year in the National Hockey League, and he does that. You're thinking what? I mean, what was your relationship with Gretzky?
Well, it was good. You know, if I may just back it up, it was an interesting story. Glenn Sather, if I'm not mistaken, it was the expansion draft when the World Hockey merged, was in Montreal. And I know Glenn from playing against him for 4 years in the WHA. So he knew what I could do, what I was capable of. And he phones me up at home. He said, Cam, we made you our first choice, the first choice in the pick overall. And, you know, you're going to be in Edmonton a long time, buy a house. And so he said, what are you doing right now? I said, I'm just sitting around my house here in Beaconsfield. And he said, you know, we got this player who's sitting in a hotel. He doesn't know anybody. Could you just take him out for a beer or something? I said, oh, absolutely. I said, who am I looking for? He said, well, it's Wayne Gretzky. Now, I didn't know much about Wayne at the time. Okay, I mean, I'd heard he was a good hockey player, but I didn't really know the kind of numbers that guy put up. So I said, yeah, okay. So I phone Wayne up and I go pick him up and I take him to a bar in Montreal and we're sitting there and he said, Cam, you played 4 years in the World Hockey. I just played a year in the World Hockey. And he said, is there a big difference between the NHL and the WHA and the World Hockey? Now, what I didn't realize is when I played for Montreal,
Yeah.
didn't matter if you were the last place team. When you took on Montreal Canadiens, the defending Stanley Cup champ 3 times over, you played at another level. So every game we played was fast paced. Every team was looking good to me. I said to Wayne, Wayne, you know what? There's a big difference between the NHL and the World Hockey. And I told him, I said, so Wayne, and if you look at Wayne, he's pretty skinny, especially at 18 years old. And I was thinking, man, if somebody hits you, you're going to break in two. And so anyway, so I told him, I said, Wayne, I know you've done well over the years, but it's going to take you a couple of years to adjust to this National Hockey League. And he looked at me kind of quizzical, like, what are you talking about? But he didn't say that. And so, what did I know that year? Like I said, he tied Marcel Dion for points at 136 points.
Who's the greatest player to ever play the game?
You know what I mean? Everybody's known for something different. I mean, if you look at Mario Lemieux, he had the long reach. He could put the puck through your legs 4 times and go around you, and you didn't know what just happened. And he's by you, and he'd pick the corner. He could deke you. Wayne Gretzky, he wasn't one of those types of players, but man, he played the game as if he's sitting in the stands. When I'm watching the game from the stands, I said, man, this game looks so easy from up here.
Mm-hmm.
But at ice level, and Wayne, he had those kind of vision as if he's sitting in the stands. He just finds the open people. And when I watch him in practice, his shot wasn't that hard. But when I see him in a game, he would come down top of the circle, slap shot. It went like a rocket. And, it's just enough room for a puck to squeak in, and he would squeak it in there. Like, it was amazing. And, I remember looking at the game sheets after the game, and I'd say, wait, you got 4 points tonight? He said, well, yeah. Like, sometimes you just didn't notice him, but he just gets his points. And then you get, like a Lafleur, who, with his speed and his guts and his getting involved in the game, like, they all bring something different to the game. And so, I can't honestly, and Bobby Orr, how do you,
Yeah.
if you didn't play against Bobby Orr and you didn't see him in the prime, how do you know how good that guy was? And Gordie Howe, he was 48 years old when I played with him. And Gordie, he had wisdom on his side because, he played starting in the 50s.
Yeah.
And so, he wouldn't skate from A to B to C. He would go right from A to B. Whereas me, I'd probably go from A to B to C to D to get the puck. And so he used his head a lot more. And I might just say one interesting thing about Gordie Howe is that when I got drafted by the Canadiens in 74, I was 6'1" and a half, and about 200, 205. And in the paper, they would say, Montreal drafted the big left winger, Cam Connor, the big left winger. Gordie Howe, at age 48, he told me that at age 16, and he was 6'1", 205 pounds. At age 48, he was 6'1", 205 pounds at age 16. And he played in the 50s. So he might have been like the equivalent of Chara back in those days. Right?
I hear you. Hey, listen, this is so much fun, but I got 2 or 3 more speed questions for you. I'll try and make them pretty fast, okay?
Yep.
In game 1 between the Canadiens and the Leafs, there was an accident, which I think everyone admitted that it was.
Yeah.
Ben Sherratt hits John Tavares, who falls to the ice. Corey Perry's skating back-to-back check, and he's skating pretty fast. Tavares falls right in front of him. He tries to avoid him and but his knee hits him in the head.
Yeah.
Clearly, Tavares is concussed, and he's out of it. Scary scene in Toronto. gets stretchered off. Everyone's concerned. You can tell that Perry is just rattled by what happened, right? And he went on to say that he knows Tavares and they've represented Canada on a couple of occasions together. But immediately at the face-off, Nick Foligno of the Toronto Maple Leafs looks at Perry and says, I know it was an accident, but he's our captain. Let's do it now and get it over with. A lot of hockey players understand that mentality, but a lot of hockey fans are saying, I don't get it. Hockey players need to evolve. This doesn't make sense. Do you understand it or you don't?
I don't understand it, because if you look at his stats, how long has he been in the league? 10 years, more maybe?
Yeah. Longer than that. He's 35. So
there you go.
He broke into the league at 18.
There you go, buddy. You look at it, he's not a fighter. He's not a dirty player. His whole career has been pretty consistent. And if it was somebody that, was known to be nasty, it was Tom Wilson maybe in this day and age, or somebody who's always aggressive and going out of the way to run people, you might wonder whether it was done, on purpose. But with Perry, you look at the replays and they have, they can look at iPads right on the bench.
Yeah.
And you look at that replay, it was a total accident. And so in my mind, I was sitting watching the game with my wife, and I dated my wife, Sherilyn, since we were 15 years old. So she has seen many, many rough hockey games over the years. And both of us were upset that Foligno would challenge him. Like, if you went and took on a tough guy that did that on purpose, tried to hurt somebody, 100% justified. That, in my mind, was 100% not justified. That was a cowardly act. I don't care. He might have thought that he had to do it, but I totally disagree. And if I was a coach, I would have told him. I would have told him, don't do anything when you get out there, because it was an accident. That's the game of hockey, right? That's the game of hockey. You play the game. You hope nobody gets hurt. You hope you don't get hurt. But if you do, accidents happen. It's a contact game. He tried to jump out of the way. So again, I think that was totally not called for. What do you think?
Yeah, no, listen, I totally agree with you. I think hockey sometimes just needs to evolve. What are you going to start doing now? Someone's going to hit someone with a slap shot by accident, and you're going to fight that person too. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's a sick podcast. I'm Marinero. He's former NHLer Cam Connor. And you can place your bets on MyBookie. Go to mybookie.ag/the sick podcast. Use code SickPicks for a 50% deposit bonus, or use code PICK10 for $10 in free play without even depositing. Bet, win, get paid. So this is it, Cam Connor. You ready? Who wins between the Canadiens and the Leafs, and who goes on to win the Stanley Cup?
Okay. Why'd you ask me that one? Okay. I want the Canadiens to win. I don't think they will. I want them to win, but I don't think they're playing exactly the way they got to play to win. They got to take the man. They got to get involved. They got to keep the score low. They got to have Carey Price stopping that puck, which he did. If they can keep that up against the Maple Leafs and have 4 wins, I'm impressed.
Who do you think wins the cup?
Carolina.
That's a good pick. Yeah, they're really fun to watch, and this was really fun to do. I hope it was as fun for you as it was for me. I know a lot of Montreal Canadiens fans are going to get a kick out of seeing former Montreal Canadian Cam Connor, who scored the game-winning goal in double overtime of Game 3 in the 1979 playoffs between the Canadiens and the Leafs after being benched for period 1, period 2, period 3, first period of overtime. Did Scotty Bowman, was it personal because you had you wanted to stay in the WHA? Now that I think about it, you think it was personal, or?
Other people have asked me that question. My wife even asked me that one time.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'd only be speculating. I have no idea. Scotty never told me.
I'll ask him one day.
Yeah. So I hope. Like it was a business decision. It was, like I said, I gave my word. And I'm a man of my word. I have my faults, but I'm not a dishonest guy. I had to stick with what I said I would do.
Cam Connor, you sound like my kind of guy. I'd love to see you in Montreal one day. You be well and you be safe.
Appreciate it, Tony, and I also have enjoyed this very much.
Thank you very much. It's the Sick Podcast. You can listen to us on all social media platforms and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at the Sick Podcast. Twitter as well. See you, Cam.
Bye, sir.